I'm Susan Cleaver. I'm a high school teacher. And my general comment is that I think there's a big difference between having hay in a field. This is the way it's been done. We are people who have lived here for generations, than having a Marcellus well drilled in the floodplain. I think having a Marcellus well there is incompatible with our life here. I think the sitting of wells in the floodplain will cause flooding, and I don't even know why we really have to consider it. I don't see why we have to consider putting these wells in the floodplain.
Thank you, Susan. Go ahead.
I'd just like to bring up a few points after listening to Mr. Hastings. Number one, he was telling you what your job is, and he missed quite a few things, I think. Your job is to represent the citizens of Dodgers County. Your job is to protect the citizens of Dodgers County. We've already clarified that the existing floodplain provides a means to have flood insurance that has not been invalidated. I don't see any need for us to rush through this because of pressure or threats of lawsuits and unconstitutionality and what have you. What I see is an opportunity for you guys to do it right, to stick to the focus, which is to protect the health, safety, welfare, property values and such of the citizens of this county. And the main thing that just boggles my mind is the existing floodplain ordinance, unless this is declared unconstitutional, this section says that you are not to develop in a floodplain or a floodway unless there are no other alternative locations. And this whole thing stemmed from Joy Huff's situation. She has 640 acres of alternative locations. What is this about? Is this about making it easy for somebody to drill in a floodplain who wants to, or is it about staying on your focus, which is to protect the citizens? Nobody says that you can't drill on a floodplain, but if there's alternative, and if it's been proven that this is going to be an issue, which I think they've done a pretty good job through so far the litigation and things that have been presented in front of the courts, that this is going to cause a major problem. And I watched all of you sitting there and listened to Mr. Hastings. I could see the faces redden and the intimidation and all. Don't let that happen to you. You are a county commission, a local government, and you are empowered to do a lot more than you're letting you think you're allowed to do. And remember that, because you're here to protect the citizens, not enable an industry that is wanting a convenient location. They've got plenty of opportunity to still drill, whether they drill in that meadow or not. They can drill. Nobody's stopping them. That's not what this is about. But what this is about is knowing what is going to be the best circumstances for the citizens. And we don't think that this is, and certainly not if the floodplain proposed right now, draft number 5 or whatever, is not doing what's going to be something, I mean, it's not going to protect the citizens the way it should, then that should be your focus on fixing it and making it right. And don't be intimidated, just know that you know, this whole business of nobody wants to go to court, nobody wants to sue, or nobody wants to, that's what lawyers do. They make money on conflict. Do we need to have that? No, we don't, but we need to focus on what your role is, which is to protect the citizens. Because one way or another, it puts you in a bad situation if the citizens aren't protected, whether you get sued by citizens who lose their homes for floods for a bad decision. To me, a simple a solution is FEMA's satisfied with some of the current parts of the floodplain, and as long as it meets the floodplain insurance opportunity, eligibility, then why not just have a floodplain ordinance which says absolutely no fill in a floodplain, and only drill if there are no other alternatives, or only put a house if there are no other alternatives, or only put a barn there. Who cares about, hey, that is not a permanent foundation such as a house or a well pad would be. I mean, get real. This little side business of trying to distract and change the whole, I mean, this is just made to confuse and intimidate. Don't let it happen, because this is about protecting the citizens, not allowing them to have their pick and choose where they want. Maybe they'll have to spend more money to drill someplace else on her property. But who cares? That's not our concern. Our concern is to protect the citizens of this county and to put the floodplain as a priority that is protected and not constructed upon when there are other alternatives. So just keep that in mind. Don't let yourself be intimidated. There are other county councils and commissions all over the country that are taking a stand, and they're winning in appeals court. So don't let yourselves be intimidated.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. My name is Roddy Steger, and I'm an attorney with Jackson Kelly. And I am joined here this evening by Stacy Brodak from Noble Energy. And we are here today. I'm sorry?
Who are you representing?
Noble Energy, sir.
Noble Energy.
We are here tonight. I don't want to get into any comments at this point. We're here tonight just to participate in the process, to hear comments, to offer suggestions. I know this has been an ongoing process and one that's taken a lot of the county commission's time, Mr. Tennant's time, and a lot of other folks' time, and obviously your time, because you're here today to listen and participate as well. And that's all we're here to do this evening. I appreciate the opportunity the county commission has afforded, and like I said, we'll be offering some specific comments and suggestions as we proceed this evening. But I just wanted to make introductions, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ken.
I'd like to say something. Diane, I agree with you on protecting our county and our floodways and our floodplains. But at the same time, I agree with Mr. Hastings that this document is not only going to be held for the oil and gas, it's going to be held whenever I want to go out and do something in the meadow, whenever I want to clean my creek, I want to take care of stuff. So we do have to get it right, because it's our rights too that could be infringed upon.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
All of these gentlemen say they've read the document numerous times and they keep having questions about it. I'd just like to know who's the author of this masterpiece. Who's the author of this masterpiece?
It was a collaboration between FEMA Region 3 and I believe Robert Perry.
In other words, you took all the paragraphs on FEMA's website and you just picked out 1, 5, 7, 9, 11 through 26. So that's just exactly how you got
to the national model which FEMA developed over the years for the whole country. And there are different parts of it for West.
I understand.
That's what I explained.
But what you have here is a one-size-fits-all.
We didn't sit down at a table and write this.
I know. I understand that. Obviously.
It was written at another level.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. Now, there may be typos. There are typos.
I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the ideas. And it seems like it's a one-size-fits-all, whether it's
You got that right. It is to a certain extent.
to an extent, but Douglas County is not the same as.
There's a lot of different variations of floodplains and some creeks are advertised, some creeks are not studied.
I understand that.
It really is.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commission. My name is Bob Horndorf, and I represent two parties here tonight. One is the West Virginia Oil and Natural Gas Association. I'm its current president, and I am also the managing director of state and local government affairs for Dominion Transmission. I want to applaud the Commission's efforts to try to get it right. What we see now, as both as an association and as a company, and we've operated in Dodgers County for over 100 years. The association has represented the industry for nearly 100 years. So we have a fairly lengthy track record of trying to do the right thing in the communities. We applaud you for doing the right thing. Well, I want to echo some of Mr. Hastings' remarks. There are problems with this ordinance. We commit our time and our energy to get it right for us, to get it right for the residents of Dodgers County. I do have a residence here in Dodgers County. I want to see it get to be right, and we pledge our support to make that happen. We're available at any time to meet with the attorneys. We've met with the county floodplain folks in Charleston, and it's important to protect both the environment and our ability to operate safely and efficiently in Dodgers County. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Okay, I'm saying this from just a standpoint of, probably you call me a farmer. Everything I want to do is I read this, even though my land's not in the farm, not in the floodplain, I'm going to have to fill out this long application. I'm going to have to notify all my neighbors. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to have to go through the whole process if I even want to put a culvert in. The way I read this, if I want to park my four-wheeler down near the creek, I can't do it for over 180 days because there's a 6-month thing in here. And I can find the pages, I marked them. There's all kinds of things that are not good for the people of the county. By the time we go through anything, to build anything, we're going to have a lot of time, a lot of money, and headaches.
Well, I will. Ma'am, are you finished? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm not.
Are you finished?
No. And in the application, I think I saw some hidden cost. I looked at the front page, and then when I get back here, there's this $500 fee up front in addition to this one back, you've already paid. I can't tell you, it would have taken me a while to hunt all of them and read them. There's no need to get through all that. And then when we get through, one person is going to decide whether I get that permit or not, after I've gone through all the time and the money. And then, it can go through the commission. I think they're supposed to be the board. And people say you can go to court if you're unhappy. Do you know how much time and money that takes? And what a headache. I'm saying this from my perspective. And I'm also saying Doddridge County, the oil and gas industry, has been what has kept us going for a long time. If it goes, we lose that, we're hurting.
Ma'am, if I may just follow up. You've actually said something that's consistent with what Mr. Hastings has a concern of in the ordinance. Dan Wellings and I actually spoke about this yesterday or the day before, and that was this issue that is difficult for a county floodplain administrator or a county commission. Most counties in West Virginia do not have general building ordinances like cities do. And I know even in Ohio County, where I come from, we do not have a building ordinance out in the county because our commission's position is that if farmers want to build something out there, they can build what they want to build out there. And we're not going to put ordinance regulations on them to build a barn, for example, like the International Building Code. Okay? The problem with the floodplain administrator with this issue of limiting the permit applicants only to the flood people that know they're within the floodplain is that he doesn't have a helicopter to inspect the county every day to determine whether someone is building within the floodplain or not. And I will agree with you that the current writing of this ordinance, and this is up to the commission as the group explains their position. The current reading, you've read it correctly, that any construction in Doddridge County, you'd have to go to the floodplain administrator to fill out the permit to see if you're within the floodplain. Because that essentially brings the masses to the floodplain administrator rather than putting the obligation on him to inspect the county every day, which is impossible to do because he'd need a helicopter to do it. So that's an issue. That's an issue. I don't have a real dog in that fight. I will do whatever the county commission orders me to do with respect to that. If the county commission decides that we're going to limit that language more specifically to those who are within the floodplain to come to seek a permit, that can be done. It can be written that way. It's a bit dangerous because not everyone knows whether they're within the floodplain or not. And we're going to rely on the citizens of the county to understand that. And that's Dan Wellings' position, that he's concerned that if we narrow that down just to those who know they're within the floodplain, that we're going to get people building all over the place in the floodplain who've not come to the floodplain administrator to make the determination of whether you're in the floodplain or not. So, but you've read it correctly. I see people, when you were speaking, I apologize, the gentleman behind you is shaking his head no, like you were wrong. But I want to tell you, you were right. And your position is consistent with Mr. Hastings' position.
Well, you have FEMA, you have other government organizations like Farm Service, you have your conservation places. There are a lot of places that do have a lot of this information.
Yeah, I know. But we're working on this ordinance, and I can appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think that we have a requirement in this county, and it goes back a few years when RT and some of the others was on the county commission, that in order to construct anything on your property that you need to come in and see the tax people downstairs and apply for a building permit. And I believe this is what the ordinance reads, or whatever law they enacted at that time. And that being the case, all that people would have to do is look at the current floodplain map and say, Mr. Brown, you're building in the floodplain. And if you're going to build in the floodplain, you're going to have a permit, and you're going to have to meet the specifications of FEMA. The house is going to have to be jacked up and blow out windows and blow out doors and stuff in the bottoms and all of this. So we have a separate ordinance that says that you apply, and Mr. Wellings would not have to go out and inspect every site.
Well, can I have a point of clarification here? Is there in fact an ordinance that is a building zone ordinance as this man has suggested? Does anyone know?
I think there's a building permit.
It's a building permit.
I don't know if it's an ordinance, but in order to put something on a piece of property, you have to go to the tax office, you fill it out, then take it to Dan.
Yeah, let me suggest to you, and I know Ohio County. Ohio County has a procedure where you do have to go report to the assessor, because the assessor has an interest to know when to properly assess property in his building. But I can tell you in Ohio County that we find $500,000 homes every day while we're doing our addressing under 911 that haven't been taxed for 3 years because we didn't know they built the darn house out in the country. You know, so I don't exactly know here in Doddridge County whether there is an ordinance that requires a citizen to receive a building permit per se versus filling out a form for the assessor for taxation processes.
It was in the paper several years ago saying that we had to get building.
Well, what I would suggest to the county commission is that you need to go back to your minutes and understand whether that ordinance was in fact passed, because that would potentially solve Mr. Welling's issue on forcing the people to come to daddy, so to speak, to understand whether or not someone is building within the floodplain or not.
And I don't know if we're going to talk about this again in specific comment time, and I know no one really wants to be here all night. I'm planning to be here as long as I need to be, and it probably will take some time. But regardless of whether there is a building permit requirement or just with the assessor, she's right, and Mr. Wellings and the county commission has no jurisdiction to require a floodplain permit, which is the way it's drafted now, for property that's outside the floodplain. So that is a serious issue. I mean, that's a jurisdictional, constitutional issue. And you have county commissions have very limited jurisdiction set forth in Article 9 of the Constitution, Chapter 7 of the Washington Code, general state law, and there are some other provisions. But there is no provision for you to do anything outside that floodplain in this floodplain ordinance. Now, Mr. Tent and I have talked about some other issues that you could potentially do that would open up an entire different can of worms that I don't want to get into. But as for what you're doing, the ordinance that you're enacting, you just can't require anybody to do it. And I do want to remind everyone that EQT was the first company that came to Doddridge County and applied for a floodplain permit for their wells. We weren't running and hiding and just drilling the well. Once this ordinance was passed and placed into effect, we were, within 6 weeks, I believe, we filed the application. So, I mean, everybody needs to recognize that. We weren't just drilling out in the floodplain. We did floodplain studies. We have other applications that are on hold because of this process. So I want that to be clear, that we weren't out there just building a house in the country. We're just drilling in someone's meadow without doing a floodplain study.